This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now. It was a nightmare.
Flight 807, you're clear for landing. Runway 7, Bravo.
All personnel report to the nearest tornado shelter. This is not a drill.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made in first. Then we may do a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. So let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Some Valley businesses and Valley people are receiving some high honors. Judge Theresa Delic is this year's Athena Award recipient and was recognized as being a visionary who has created opportunities for young people. And after 20 years of experience in her field, Judge Delic has created a path for other women to follow in the justice system. Writers for The Vindicator and the Tribune Chronicles also made some headlines for receiving high honors in various aspects relating to local news stories. That's why story number 1 made it this week. Story number 2. Vito in as new assistant superintendent for Canfield. Canfield hit the headlines after voting in John Vito as the new assistant superintendent for the next school year. Vito is set to earn about $110,000 and will fill the seat vacated by John Tullio. Now, he'll be in this seat for the next 3 years. John Vito not only has experience as an instructor, but also has experience facilitating grants relating to educational matters. Now, he is also a resident of Canfield. Story number 3. The Cavelli and Amphitheater seem ready for revival. The Cavelli and Amphitheater will attempt to carry on with summer events after sitting idle because of gathering restrictions put in place by the state because of COVID. The city also plans to put about $1.46 million towards the loan taken out in 2005 to fund the Cavelli Center. The city also seems to have a solid plan to try and rebound from any losses brought on by COVID-19. That's the Cavelli Center and Amphitheater. They have a solid plan included with the city to rebound. Now, entertainment centers all across Ohio were left with no choice but to shut down until gathering restrictions were lifted. In some places, they're still around. Now, some of these entertainment districts and venues were saved by aid money, but many others and a lot of other ones probably will never ever open again, and that's why story number 3 made it to the top 8 this week. Story number 4. Hubbard Board of Education has decided to extend union contracts. Contract extensions are set for the Hubbard Board of Education teaching and non-teaching unions. Pay increases were included in the contract and will cost the district about $260,467 for the teachers union and $47,081 for the non-teaching staff. Now, new contract negotiations are in place for 2022, according to Hubbard Superintendent Ray Solomon. That's why story number 4 made it in this week. Story number 5. The well-being of local contracted and public workers. It may be time to check and see how they're doing. OSHA is investigating an accident after a road worker was killed doing road work on South Avenue in Boardman. Road crew members have been in numerous headlines during the past couple of months due to safety concerns, and some crew members have even lost their life while on the job. Now, in stressful times when people are just trying to get the job done, it may be time to check up on the well-being of local public workers and servants. Public officials, including the governor, have been working tirelessly through COVID-19, and a load of other public workers have been working hard as well outside of the governor, which may be time to draw some concern and see how they're doing mentally. If if you know what I'm saying. Now, one key talking point in this story is how things can sometimes go wrong when there is stress and pressure on contracting and public workers, including public servants. That is what got this story in this week. Story number 5. Story number 6. Youngstown City Schools making more changes, still facing a failing grade, along with huge challenges and cuts over the years. Youngstown City Schools hit the headlines again with CEO Justin Jennings' eye-popping story geared at yet another change for Youngstown City Schools. Now, it is important to note that children and teens are very fragile when it comes to adapting to changes, especially during the education process. In the early years and teenage years, Youngstown has stayed in the news constantly for over 40 years, making changes, and still has not been lifted to the level of a grade A school district. This story shows the growing concern from outside sources watching public money pour in to rescue a failing district. Youngstown CEO Justin Jennings says that these changes will create better opportunities for students aspiring to be scholars. Or as the CEO Justin Jennings says, or he would put it, scholars aspiring to be scholars. This story is still developing. That's why story number 6 almost made it to the top 2 this week. Story number 7 and the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Almost there. When will the shooting and killing end in Youngstown? Brothers and sisters, Youngstown residents have reported hearing gunshots on multiple occasions, and we're only 5 months into this year. Now, city residents seem mystified after one person was killed in a shooting near Judson and Market Street on the city's south side. After shooting incidents on that side, and a few days later, followed that incident, a car plowed through a building, and people reported more gunshots fired on Midlothian and Southern Boulevard. Local residents are voicing their frustrations with the lack of safety and security being promised by city officials. It's important to note that Youngstown is not the only U.S. city witnessing an uptick in violent crimes. Major news sources are blaming high poverty rates and the flood of stories demonizing the police on these spikes in crime. And that's why story number 7 made it in this week. It almost made it to the top. Big headline. Story number 8 and the top local headline and developing news story that made it in this week. The top local headline and developing news story that made it in this week. Does the Valley have a worker problem or employer problem? Big question. Workers and employers took to the airwaves, news outlets, and they've been voicing their concerns about the recent state of the job market. Employers are complaining that they need good help, and workers are not showing up. Some of them are just not meeting the standards. Now, the recent state of the job market has made national news, with well-known companies facing worker shortages in a high time of demand. Now, many observers of this alarming story are highly aware of what's happening what happens to countries that cannot produce, because it usually amounts to more poverty due to failure to meet global demand. So what happens is people who are observing this knows what happens when countries can't meet the demand from other countries, and that usually doesn't end well. Now, the reality in this story is the fact that you cannot meet any demands or any business demands, any gross. I mean, if you have products, you cannot meet those demands without work or workers producing. So that's why story number 8 is at the top this week. We have to get back into the groove of things to keep up with the global demand, and the fact that what that time off of the workroom floor does to us mentally, physically, and emotionally, it keeps us in a state of nothing is getting done. So that's why story number 8 made it to the top this week. But those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories. You're in the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. As a child, I was told that there's poetry in telling stories. There's meaning to life. There's feeling. There's joy. There's work that has to be done. But most of all, there's love and joy and having a story to hold on to. And that's how I became the mediator. And that's my story. And I'm sticking to it, baby. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Pollution is still a problem, especially plastic. Plastic waste seems to be a top concern for environmentalists. Now, how people and companies dispose of plastic has been steadily hanging on in the news, the headlines. Now, according to some reports, about 55%, that's almost about the number of plastic waste. They're saying that it comes from major corporations, and now this is sounding the alarm on how plastic is getting into everything, including ocean water, the food we eat, and the water we drink. Now, the story also goes on to show how mass amounts of land is being covered with plastic waste. Now, that is why the story crept in this week, because they're saying that we human beings are putting this plastic into the atmosphere, including corporations and businesses. And that's why story number 1 crept in this week. Story number 2. Ooh-wee. Heating up. The violence continues, but why? Why do people want to kill each other? More standoffs with the police are ending with someone not coming out alive. 2 Maryland sheriff's officers were found this out after being ambushed, resulting in them being shot at. They were shot at multiple times. Now, whatever was going on in the apartment that was raided concluded with the suspect choosing not to go out without a fight. With Scarface on him. Say hello to my little friend. Now, the story goes on to say that while serving a warrant, officers found the shooter barricaded inside and ended with the police sending in a drone, only to find out that the suspect was dead. It's pretty scary. Now, the city of Atlanta has also witnessed an uptick in violence after 24 people were shot over the weekend, leaving 6 people dead. Many major cities are blaming the increase in violence on the poverty brought on by the pandemic and the stories exposing police interaction. So they're saying that these stories, what's going on with the police and the pandemic and the fact that people are just possibly losing their minds, and they're saying that this is resulting in a crime wave across the country. Police interaction with the public mixed with COVID-19 and the fact that people have guns. I don't think that's going to end well. Let's just hope that we can join hands, be thankful for what we have, and sing glorious songs of joy. And that's why story number 2 made it in this week. Fa la 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 la. Story number 3. America's tax system may still be too complex, so does it need reform? One headline in CNBC says that some Americans are considering giving up their citizenship, especially the ones who live overseas. Tax reform headlines have calmed down, but this story could highlight a topic that needs to be discussed. The IRS now has filings piling up in the midst of the pandemic, and the majority of Americans still have no clue how the tax system even works. One talking point is the fact that people have been cheating on their taxes for years, including presidents. So how do you dodge that, and how do you get it to be more simplified? And how do you get it to work for everybody? I mean, people are experiencing big delays this year in getting their refund, especially the people who do it the right way. COVID-19 has also exposed what a catastrophe can do to the IRS in this story. Now, the number of people who fail to pay the IRS continues to be a problem for not only this country, period. This is probably compared to other countries, how they handle their tax system. Now, this is why this story made it in this week. And with Biden calling to tax the rich and high earners, things could get even more uglier, get even uglier if you want to be specific. And that's why story number 3, don't be so hard on me. I'm doing my best to keep this organized and easy for you to navigate the news and be reviewed. And that's why story number 3 made it in this week. Taxes during tax season in America. That's why it made it in this week. Story number 4. Will Middle Eastern countries ever find a peaceful solution? Folks, conflict is the word. Conflicts in the Middle East continue to drag on, costing a lot of money and a lot of lives, billions of lives probably over the years. Conflict, once again, that's the word for today. The conflict in Israel is just another growing conflict, only predicted to cause more conflict in what seems to be a never-ending conflicting region. There's conflicts all over the place. Conflict is our word for today, and I'm sure you get the point, because what is going on in the Middle East doesn't seem to be letting up, and it appears to be over a strip of land that 2 countries have been fighting over for years. And there's also things going on within Israel, period, that are causing strife between the Palestinians and the Israelis. One group migrated and settled, while another group seems to be powerless in an ongoing battle to just find a place to stay. If you want to get the whole gist of the story, please look it up. I guarantee you'll get different angles, different viewpoints, but it all seems to be, at the end of the day, over land. Israel says that it's defending itself from ongoing rockets fire, while Hamas and the Palestinian people say that they are fighting for land that naturally belongs to them. Now, the fight over the Gaza Strip has been brewing for a long time, and that is why a lot of people feared that this would escalate, and they knew that it was brewing, and they knew that it would pretty much get out of hand over time. And that's why this story is so important. Now, either way, these stories don't seem to be letting up, and it seems to be putting more attention on the Middle East in a bad way. Now, there are peaceful things probably going on over there, but you probably won't hear about them because of the war that continues to go on in each region, not just in Israel, not just in Palestine, but other regions as well. And that's why story number 4 is so important. That's why I made it this week. Well, those are our top 4 stories that made it this week. I'll be right back with the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories. So don't go anywhere. You're on the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back. If you want to check out the stories that almost made it in or did make it in, go to our Twitter feed on our website. Check out everything. All of the sources are there. And go to the website. It's method8inc.com, method8inc.com, where you can buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Simple and sweet. That's what I was told when I was putting together the story. Nothing complex, just keep it simple and sweet to where the viewers can read and examine top 8 stories. Reading is fun and mental, and learning about stories that are happening all around you can give you the ability to create your own story. And that's when I put on my suit and tie, and I became the mediator, flying around the city, searching and praying that a story would rain in, baby, from the sky. Oh, don't you feel it? Oh, that's what mediation is all about. So that's what we have to do. Let's get to it, baby. Woo-wee! Let's get to it. Story number 5. Race relations stories in America are hanging on in the headlines. It's just start loving each other. America has a brutal history, and in the current climate of land ownership, poverty, crime, and education, it is being exposed. Not only are race relations hanging on in the headlines, but with the ongoing push for change, Americans may have no choice but to try and mend its broken pieces, because race relations stories have flooded headlines for some time now. Now, with protests and violent clashes from street gangs and growing concerns about the future of policing, let's hope that America can someday get things ironed out and in order. Now, as we continue to strive for a better union between those wanting a fair shot at the American dream, let's dream together. Let's come together. Let's show love. Let's be happy and let's be sad. But when we're sad, let us come together and be glad that we have something to hold on to and something to love. That's why story number 5. Oh, I can feel it. That's why story number 5. Oh, made it in this week. The joy of love. Racial strife coming together. Bonding. It's coming. Story number 6. The cost of medical care is creeping back into the headlines. One report by CNN shows that sweeping medical costs under the rug can't go on for too much longer. From debt collections, calls, to churches having to step in and pay medical expenses, the truth is that people have been screaming foul about the cost of medical care for a long time. This problem seems to be similar to the college issue, because healthcare and colleges are both the college atmosphere are both just too expensive. College, period, for the average citizen seems to be too expensive. Now, the report goes on to point out how one of America's largest hospital chains has been suing patients even during the pandemic, COVID-19. The report states that 600 patients have been sued by Moberly Regional Medical Center during the COVID-19 saga for failure to pay their medical bills. Now, one patient at the hospital says that he was sued for an emergency visit that cost over $9,000. Now, this story also points out some miscommunication factors that take place in hospitals, and how the hospitals have having problems with patients when they sign on to be treated. So they're saying that these patients may not be understanding what they're signing. Now, the reality is that the United States has a complex and still evolving medical care system in which a lot of people have failed to make it out of, especially financially. Now, the story concludes with the simple fact that a lot of people are tangled in a medical web, financial web, whatever you want to call it. And it's not getting any better, and that's why story number 6 made it in this week. Put your hands up if you got medical bills. I don't see a lot of people celebrating. That's why it made it in this week. Story number 7 in the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made it in this week. Whew, almost there. The gap between the rich, poor, and middle class is still getting bigger on a global scale, and even right here at home in America, the gap between rich countries and poor countries seems to still be growing. Now, this also is the case between the rich, poor, and middle class here in America. Now, with the federal debt soaring and an administration set on increasing foreign and government aid, a lot of people are concerned about this simple fact of the gaps and the money. Where will it come from? Now, the logic seems to be centered around the belief that the rich and high earners have to come back down to earth and pay up. But there are some key discussions taking place in this story either way. Now, some are even saying that the system is rigged in favor of the rich. Now, if this topic of discussion goes on and doesn't get earned out anytime soon, there could be a huge data grab based on who is actually pulling their weight in America. That's even when you talk about in the fight against poverty, what have the rich been doing? What have the people in poverty been doing to get out of poverty. Now, one real fact is that the virus has exposed the fundamental truth of what happens when 1% of the people hold the majority of the wealth, the cash, the money. That's why story number 7 made in this week. The gap's getting bigger. Story number 8 and the top international headline and developing news story that made in this week. How did unemployment aid expose a flaw in the system during COVID-19? Now, as the pandemic eases up, the urgency to get people back to work is creating more headlines. But what did this expose about the system, period? Most employers will tell you that when payday rolls around, employees don't mess around when it comes to their earned money. But what happens when you give the money because of a pandemic, when you give it money to help them out? Now, that's becoming a real big concern. Well, some states are now having to pay people just to go back to work. So they're not getting paid to be at work, but they're getting paid to go back to work. The state of Oklahoma has reported, as reported by USA Today, this week they said that they're offering $1,200 for people to get off of unemployment benefits just to get back to work. Now, this has probably never been done in all of U.S. history and all of world history. Now, other states like Ohio are even offering cash prizes for people to get vaccinated, while in the process threatening to end unemployment if people do not get back to work. Now, all of this has exposed some serious flaws in how incentive programs are designed, while also revealing how some people take advantage of benefits put in place to keep the ball rolling. Not just people, but how the system works. Now, at the moment, about 9 states have decided to end their unemployment programs. Another revelation is that a lot of people have had to adapt to staying at home and are afraid of going back to work because of the virus. Now, the report also says that mothers have had a hard time finding people to care for their children, and some people have found other ways to make money outside of going back to work. That's why they're saying they're not going back to work. Now, this story reveals a pivot by workers and employers, while also exposing some flaws in the unemployment system. Well, what I mean by pivot is showing that there's something mixing up in this pot, where there may be some disconnections between the workers and the unemployed, and there may be some things, some lack of trust, and causing the worker not to want to go back to that job. But as of now, we're only hearing the employer side and a little bit of the employee side. So as the story continues to develop over the weeks, maybe they're probably will be able to get this. We probably will be able to get this stuff earned out and get people back on the workroom floor and get back into the state of productivity. But the sad part about this story is the virus is still lingering around, and that's the biggest talking point inside of this top story, and that's why I made it to the top this week. Well, I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research. As usual, I'd like to thank all the news outlets, the journalists, the people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I'm just a mediator. If you want to show some support, it does not take much. All you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. I'll get through back. I'll come back and do it all over again next week, looking through over 200 or more stories, reviewing what's going on so you can be prepared for next week on which stories are big, which stories to look out for. That's what I'm here for. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week with me, Brian West. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator. I am out of here. Peace. Have a good week, everybody.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.